Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of connection to that which is bigger than us, to the great mystery, to the divine unfolding, and to that truth within that just gets so clear as we move through life's challenges, all the icky, sticky moments that life brings us and that we work our way through to the other side where there's a realization that's, going to claim even more power for ourselves, even more truth, even more knowing. And I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird, and I'm all about this life evolution. Once I woke up to that this was going on, it's like peering behind the curtain and seeing the Wizard of Oz and going, oh, so that's how this works. Okay. And, just approaching life from a whole new level, a whole new direction. And that's what I love to do with my clients. And you're going to hear from somebody today who also really empowers women. And so if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you like what I've been sharing with you on Soul Nectar Show, check out my website, carriehummingbird.com, Kerri, hummingbird.com, and check out all the programs that are there. Today's guest is a good friend, Monica Rodgers, and I just want to welcome you to the show, and I'm going to read more about you. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Carrie.
Oh, I'm excited for the conversation we're about to have today because Spirit really packed it in. Woohoo! We're going to get to it. But let me tell you a little bit about Monica before we get started. So Monica is an unfatigable advocate for the full actualization of women. She's a champion for advancing consciousness and personal accountability through co-active coaching in women's circles, retreats, and online courses. She's dedicated to helping women live a life of radical self-approval and personal truth while holding a vision for what's possible when we each do our inner work to fully integrate both our human aspects and our divine. And she is a leadership coach that empowers women to awaken from the trance of unworthiness. And oh my goodness, we sure need that right now, us women on the planet. You can read more about her in the notes, the show notes, but we're going to get started. And you can check out my interview on Monica's podcast. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. But Monica, tell us a little bit about you and how you came into doing this work that you're doing today, which is so needed and so powerful for women to really step into their truth and their voices and out of these like conditioned roles that we've all been just like, we can't breathe, okay? We can't breathe. So.
Oh, it's so, yeah. And actually it's so great that you just said that, like, we can't breathe. I just wrote a piece the other day, and it was kind of actually about this, kind of when my world fell apart. I had, what I think other people know as like a full-on breakdown or a dark night of the soul. That happened actually about 11 years ago, or right at the time of the last economic kind of downturn, the housing market crash. And it's just really interesting because as everything was falling apart, I actually had almost this giddy feeling come over me. Don't get me wrong, I was extremely, it had been in distress, I think, for a long time, but had been ignoring it, had been numbing it. And I think, our spirit, our body always knows, right? The body holds the wisdom. And so I was getting all kinds of symptoms, but like most women, I had learned to turn off that inner telemetry inside myself. And so I was living from the neck up, right? From the logic, from my mind, and not really allowing myself to fully embody myself so that I could actually listen to the messages my body was continually giving me. And so it took really a full-on universal smackdown for me to start paying attention. But when everything fell apart, I remember like almost metaphorically looking around and adding things to the fire because, including toxic relationships, including, at that time, a marriage I had tried to make work for a long, long time that just wasn't working. My business was going down. It was literally like everything that wasn't stable and true had to go. And so I really think that was the first time I remember being able to breathe, ironically enough.
Oh, I so relate to that feeling. And I want to say, because I just threw that in there, I want to say, because I am a white woman and I know the context of that, I can't breathe.
Yeah.
And I'm sensitive to that. And so I want to say, like, Monica, if you and I feel like we can't breathe, we know that there's people that really can't breathe. If we're privileged white women and we can't breathe, then freaking nobody can breathe on this planet.
Yeah.
So like we're in a state. We are really bound up in some paradigms and some crap that has been going on for a long time. And so this process, I know in my own journey, like as soon as I walked away from the things that were suffocating me, I started to breathe again. I started to have some freedom and I felt actually immediate relief. Like when I moved out of my 20-year relationship and got my own place and I moved in the first night, I was like relaxed. Like I
Right.
didn't have the constant torment of like constant ping, ping, badger, badger, ping, ping, like the constant war, the war basically.
Yeah, yeah, right. And that doesn't mean or make what I did any less difficult, right? Like I really recognized there was a part of me that was like, oh shit, what have I done? And then there was this other really clear part of me that was like, yes, keep going. That so yeah, my introduction into this work was a full on life breakdown. And I remember just really having to come to a point of full surrender. I grew up, I grew up in a religious household, right? And I think a lot of us do. And then there are a lot of us that don't, but my training ground was really a lot of kind of, we do it this way, right? And there is a right way. And so my internal kind of, nothing that I felt or I resonated with was part of my experience. In fact, it was the opposite. I felt like I was just in my body. I was so uncomfortable in my body with kind of the way the world was, that I think in order to survive it, I kind of left my body. And I think a lot of women do that. I think we disembody sometimes at a very early age. And like I said, we stop being able to listen. So I love kind of this, when I fully surrendered and I started to actually recognize that in order to heal, I had to reveal the things that were really getting in my way, that I had not given myself permission to feel, do, say, right? All the ways we edit ourselves, we edit our bodies, we edit our minds, we edit our thoughts. And really what happens is we end up doing a number on ourselves because we're not in alignment with our truth. And so the more I allowed things to be revealed, that were either a part of my past, the more I was feeling and healing those aspects of my life that I had never really allowed myself to, or given myself permission to feel the way that I felt about it and call that okay or call that good, right? So I needed to really kind of start to practice what I call, radical compassion, self-compassion, or radical self-approval.
Self-approval is a new term, and I like that. It's like nobody else can approve of you, right? I mean, you're the one in you, and you're the only one that can approve of you and your choices. And anytime that I've ever looked for that outside of myself, I have been disappointed because it's not there. Like people try, like people might love you enough to want to try, but nobody can ever approve of you the way that you have to approve of yourself.
That's right. And I want to give props here to, Mama Gina and to Megan Jo Wilson. Those are two women that have been hugely influential in my life around that, right? That piece, which is the radical self-approval and just what you said, right? It really is a practice. And I think it's such a worthy practice for women, because again, right, I'm trying to think of the writer right now, a wonderful Black writer who wrote The Body Is Not an Apology. All of the ways, again, in which we, really we're complicit in our own subjugation. I don't think a lot of us realize that, there's a time and a point where we realize we might have been an unconscious victim to the way that we've been trained in society. But once we can see it, once it's revealed, it's really up to us to, and I often talk about continuing to put my life inside of the Revelation Project, because whenever I'm feeling stuck or stopped, or I'm feeling my body kind of tense up or offer me some information, like it's really for me about getting quiet and listening, and and putting my life inside of the project and asking what is wanting to be revealed right now, and again practicing that self-approval.
Yeah,
Okay,
it,
yeah.
it's so powerful. I think that trying to make it work in a relationship for a really long time, where you might feel like you're constantly compromising yourself in order to make peace with the other person. I mean, I don't know if you experienced that, but that was like the place I experienced it. And it's like a little tiny piece of you gets hidden or chained up with every little negotiation that you make to try to keep the peace. And I don't know if it's conflict avoidance exactly. I think partially there's like this conflict avoidance that I've experienced. Like I'm not supposed to engage in conflict, or if I engage in conflict, then I could be a bitch or something like that. And then again, I didn't want to be that way because my mom was very conflict embracing, so I didn't want to be like that. So I went the opposite way and tried to always make peace. But I've learned that like you can't make peace by like subjugating yourself or denying yourself or smothering yourself in order to make other people happy. Like that never makes peace. It makes even worse disruption when you're not telling your own truth to other people around you, and when you're sort of buckling or waffling underneath the pressure of their scrutiny.
Well, and we can all tell when we're not in alignment with our truth because we'll actually feel it. So for me, oftentimes it's literally like a tightening in my throat where I can't, actually feel like the freedom to self-express in that moment, right? And those are all our body's signs, that we're actually, there's something to say, right? That actually you can feel it, right, in your heart, in your solar plexus. Actually our whole chakra system, right, is great access for that kind of alignment, and really checking in with each of those energy centers and really kind of getting curious, and these are all of the tools that it sounds like the oracle, the obvious, some of what I'm saying, and yet there's a way, I think, that we've been so trained against going in the direction of what might feel messy or what might feel scary or what might feel gritty or uncomfortable. And yet I believe that those are actually portals into, I always say my mess is my message. And what I really love encouraging women to do is to go toward the mess versus away from it. Going in again with curiosity, compassion, and radical self-approval, because that's the work, I think, where when things get tight and messy, those are all indicators, right, that there's something on the other side that needs and that's wanting to be revealed.
Yeah, absolutely. As you notice, like I've been having these little throat issues, like for the last couple of, because I've gone through a pretty significant upheaval in my own, a really intimate relationship with somebody I really love. And I've had to put a big boundary there and be like, this was disrespectful. No more. I will no longer allow you to disrespect me in this way. And it's interesting because it's like, I feel like my whole life has called me to this, Monica. Like, I feel like every relationship, including the one with myself, it's like I had to put a hard stop to it. I had to do like this, no, no more.
Yeah.
It's like, it was like all of my attempts to peacefully resolve things through negotiation or discussion, or like, my path has not allowed me that. My path has put people in my direct line who don't operate that way, who need to be told no. And one of the, if you're looking at psychological terms, one of the things I've realized is that it's a narcissistic pattern, and it's like a aggressive narcissist pattern, And this is like a misunderstanding, is what I read from these books. I've been trying to understand this, is like there's a lot of people for whom a very subtle conversation can be life-changing and can actually work. You know, you can have a conversation with somebody and it actually creates change. But then the pattern I've been experiencing is not that. It's the opposite. It's not from a sense of wounding. It's like, hold on.
Yeah, and I don't think it's any accident, right? And again, I think you're so wise to pay attention, right? To like, and this is also that piece I think we, right?
It's like suppressing our voices. It's so interesting this is happening to me on the show. But it's basically like I have suppressed my own voice for much of my life, trying to make peace with people who thinking that the only reason they're acting this way is from wounding. Like the only reason they're doing this is because they're wounded, and if they were scared, and if I just could understand them and I could just talk them out, you know, then we would just solve the whole thing.
Oh, yes. And it
And
is
that's not
so,
it, actually. There's actually people who are just aggressive and they just do things to I don't know, to win something that they want, or to punish, or to whatever, or just because they just don't care. Like they just don't
well,
care.
and I think part of what you're saying is right. There, right? There's wounds, there's other reasons, but again, this is where I think as women we need to be very discerning, because we're natural givers, we're naturally compassionate, we're naturally nurturers. And so we go to that place of wanting to open our hearts and be very compassionate and very forgiving. Unfortunately, though, what happens is exactly what you were talking about. We give pieces of ourselves away in order to keep the peace, in order to, you know, be respected, in order to be loved, in order to be cherished. And the bottom line is we have to do that over here first. And so I often will say that one of the big misunderstandings about boundaries is what, just kind of what you were saying before, that, you know, oh, I'm going to be called a bitch, or I'm going to be this, or I'm going to be that. I often look at our inner light, our spiritual light, as like that flame that burns very, very brightly. And so we have to be very, very diligent about almost like putting our hand in front of the flame, like we would a birthday candle. Right? And keep it from blowing out, because there are people that will come into our lives who actually will blow that flame out. And so it's very important for us to, you know where that line is, and to say no. And also for women to understand that no is a complete sentence. No.
Yeah, no is a, you know, it's so interesting to me that with so much light work, so many people that focus on teaching light working and all of this and manifestation, they're like, stay in your yes, stay in your yes, stay in your yes. And it's like, I've learned the no is actually a really powerful word. It
And
works.
sometimes the no is a yes. It's a yes for you. It's a yes for me. You know, a no out there, and this was, you know, something my partner, who is also a wise woman, had taught me years and years ago, which was a no out there means a yes for me. And I love that, because again, women are taught to put ourselves last, and we end up being selfless. And I love Glennon Doyle's work in her recent book, Untamed, where she kind of talks about the world doesn't need selfless women. We need women who are full of themselves, like meaning fully embodied, fully willing to know where their boundaries are, where they're willing to say, no, not that. And then they can be a full, unified, 100% yes for the things that they really do have the alignment for, they really do have the energy and the spirit for. And it's no more of this, you know, shooting on ourselves.
And it's also kind of what you'll settle for. I mean, I was kind of told early on that I was being selfish by like taking care of myself with massages and things like spa days and things like that. And I've come to realize over since I left my former relationship and started really dismantling the construct that I'd been programmed with by my family, my society, I was like, wait a second, that's the least of self-care. That's just like surface self-care. That it's getting a massage and getting a spa day and getting my nails done, that is just the icing on the cake of self-care. Self-care is like being able to say, this is me, this is my who I am, I'm speaking my truth, here's my book, I'm publishing my truth, and I'm sorry if people close to me don't like it. You don't like me speaking my truth, you don't like me out there spreading my message, you would rather me shut up and go be quiet and leave you alone, whatever it is. I mean, I ever since I spoke my truth, Monica, I have faced closed doors from the people that were previously close to me in my life, because it's hard when a woman starts to speak her truth. It's hard to hear when when your daughter starts to speak her truth and say, listen, this was not cool. When
Yeah.
your mom starts to speak her truth and say, hey, that is not okay behavior, I don't like that, and you don't treat your women that way.
Right. When we stop standing in line, right? When we
Yeah.
actually step out of line is when things start to change. And again, these are all of the places that we women have been taught not to go, taught not to do. And if you look back, even in fairy tales, from, like all of the ways that the training ground works, if you look at even something like Little Red Riding Hood, right? Like, don't go off the path, right?
Or
Um,
Sleeping Beauty. You're
oh,
so
wait
loved
for
as
the
long as
handsome
you're
prince.
sleeping and looking beautiful.
Oh my
Just don't
goodness, right?
speak or do anything. Just lie
Right.
there so we can just look at how pretty you are.
I mean, the messages, right? The messages are insidious.
It
They're
is.
hidden, they're often cloaked and disguised in very, very pretty, appealing, seductive um, disguises. And that's what they are. They're disguises. And unfortunately, what I think we're seeing right now, and fortunately, right, is really a full-on collapse of the systems that have been keeping so much of this facade in place, because it really is a facade. And so what we're seeing are a lot of, like, macro and micro reflections of what's been going on inside of us. So if you look, I know you're a big fan of this too, and really understanding how, Mother Earth, right? And we are in a climate crisis. So again, it's this degradation of the feminine, and we all have masculine and feminine energy within ourselves. But a lot of what we have to look at, and this is where the Revelation Project comes in, is kind of where the shadow masculine and feminine energies have really kind of been dominating how we live and, in the world, and how we relate to one another. And it's really getting right with that energy inside of ourselves first, and then we're able to actually do our true work out in the world to help now balance what we're seeing in our environment. And I'm seeing so many people really start to, do this work from a number of different angles. And so, I'm feeling a lot of hope, a lot of positivity, even though it seems like there's, constantly a barrage of negative news, negative energy. I'm actually seeing some tremendously beautiful things happen too.
Well, I think that that's because, to me anyway, we've been operating at this really fake, um, plastic, perfect idea of how life is. And that's not true. Like,
Well, yeah, we've been trained I always say we've been trained to live on the surface level of life, but we can't breathe up here, right? It's
because
the
it's not true. It's a
No, it's
lie.
the place where we wear all the masks,
Like,
like,
nobody tells you how messy it is to have a baby, for example. Like, nobody tells you your body's going to do all that stuff. Nobody says that. They just like, oh, you're so beautiful with your big belly. And then, but you're like, once you're in it, you're like, well, what happens next? Oh, it's got to come out. What? I mean, like, just that alone, it's got to come out. How's it getting out? And what's going to happen to my body, and what's it going to look like, and how much is it going to hurt? And all that, we're not prepared for any of the depth of that, because we're just kept in this like really strange Barbie doll land where we're just trained to just, be pretty, and if it hurts, don't talk too loudly about that, you know, pretend,
right?
I mean, just hide that.
busting that myth again. Like I call that soul diving. And I think it's really interesting when we start diving, you know, doing that soul diving work, then suddenly we can breathe, you know, back to kind of the breath. It's again, it's the place we're taught not to go, we're trained not to go there. And yet that within place, that dark, gritty, unknown, you know, it's like we're so afraid of it. But once we actually have a practice in doing it, it becomes, again, that internal compass. It becomes that rock of our being. It becomes where, you know, we start to question, right, the way that we've been taught. And I call that place the unbecoming place. It's where we start to unbecome. You know, as women, we're taught, right, in so many ways, like that's unbecoming. I say more of that for
Yeah,
women.
sharing what's actually going on. And I have to say that I've been doing that out of necessity for a while now. Like when I first left my former marriage, I was just getting started on my spiritual path. And for a while there, I didn't have any support from the people that used to be closest to me because everybody sort of turned their back. So I started sharing things that I was going through in the moment, like from my heart on social media, just because I needed an outlet, like I needed a place to share with, and just to see if anybody even gave a crap, right? I mean, because I felt like nobody really gave a crap in my life that was close to me. So I
Mm-hmm.
started sharing on social media to see, and you know what? I found that other women were like, oh my God, you just spoke what I couldn't speak, but I was feeling that. And so I started this process of just being really honest with how I was feeling. And it looks like a hot mess because everybody else is pretending to be perfect with their kids, like kissing their cheeks and stuff. And I'm going, well, I hope you're really having that life, but that's not the life I'm having. You know, like that's not how it's showing up for me. But that's really great that you got them to do that for you. And hopefully it's genuine. But I'm not having that experience. I do believe some people do experience that beautiful, like idyllic sort of thing that's expressed on social media a lot, but I haven't been that. That hasn't been me until recently. You know, I finally
Well, I
have a
was
partner
gonna
who
say,
respects me, you know?
yeah. Well, what about too the idea that we actually get to have the full range? But what I love what you're saying is this idea of actually being able to authentically self-express what's there. And when we do that, I always say that our truth creates resonance. For when we are fully self-expressed, it's this idea of kind of tapping into our divine. It's when we align, we are divine. And this
Mm.
idea of actually creating then the resonance and the truth that other people can then hear. And that's the other piece that I love is as women start to actually get self-expressed and they realize, like, I'm not alone. There are actually
Yes.
people that resonate with my truth. And those people are our tribe. Those are our people. And so it's so funny because my other work is in the realm of teaching people social media and social digital media. And I noticed from a very, you know, again, back to kind of really the beginning of Web 2.0, you know, and noticing that, wow, there is this law of attraction that's actually alive and well, and you see it in the digital space a lot. Where when you, and this is where, you know, it gets a little tricky because social media, I always think of it as a wonderful platform for social change because of the power of what I'm talking about. However, with great power comes great responsibility. And, you know, that can also be used, you know, as an instrument for negativity and all of those other things. I don't you know, suggest that we all live in a you know, a vacuum where we're only hearing, you know, what we want to hear. But what I do always say is that you deserve to enjoy your social media experience and you deserve to be who you are. And so if you find that you can't be who you are or you're afraid to self-express on social media, then clean up your news feed and get rid of those people.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay to set boundaries and it's okay to say not right now. It's okay, you know, and these are things that I think because I had these ideas, these conditionings, I thought, well, if I'm a mother, then I always have to blah, 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 blah. If I'm a daughter, then I always have to, X, Y, Z, D, D. And I don't actually. There's actually none of that. I actually had a really powerful ceremony this weekend, and the message that came through was your lessons are not your children's lessons, and your children's lessons are not your lessons. And so it's just basically like everybody has their own lessons, and all we're really responsible for is our own lessons, not taking on responsibility or trying to do it for them or help them with it. No, they're at a certain point, they're responsible for their lessons, and your job is sort of like done, just like with your partner and everybody else. So it's very, I feel like our domestication makes us very entangled up with each other, as if like our children, for example, their performance has to do with us somehow. And at a certain point, that's not true, really. At a certain point, you could believe me, I've done it. You can fire hose somebody with all the wisdom and thing that they need and all the love, and they can still refuse to drink or absorb any of it. It's like, nope, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to keep living exactly the way I stubbornly want to, and I'm not going to take any of that information. Well, then fine. It's like, well, then it's yours. It's
Yeah, well, and the other thing I love what you're pointing to is this idea of get the dogs barking
oh
in the background. Um, this idea that it's actually not about us having their answers, anybody else's
right.
answers. Like I love the work that allows me, and this work that allows me to get curious and ask my clients, you know, the questions that are going to help lead them to their answers, because my answers are not their answers and vice versa, right? So advice is really not like a thing in my work, right? I think oftentimes we can kind of make the mistake of thinking, oh, she's going to show me the way, or she's gonna have the answers. And it's like, no, actually, you have your answers. What I can do is help you determine and discern by asking you, and again, a lot of this work is about embodiment. It's oftentimes we've just been trained not to listen to the body, but the body always will tell us. And not only that, but signs, right? Like you were coughing
Yeah.
earlier, or actually being able to look to nature. All around us are signs all the time. And what's happening is oftentimes the question is, what is wanting to be revealed right now? A lot of people look at the Revelation Project and think it's religious, right? And it's everybody gets to have their own spiritual autonomy. And I say life is a revelation project. So it's this idea of being able to be in relationship with life in such a way that you're co-creating at all times. And the universe will often send us messages. We also have to be willing to receive them. We have to be willing to ask for them, because I think also, as I think you mentioned this the last time, the universe is also very respectful to our own sovereignty, right? So it's not going to, our guides, our angels, these energetic forces outside of ourselves are, not going to intercede unless we ask, but there's always other ways to call in the help and the assistance and the grace that we need. I love Tasha Silver's work. She talks a lot about change me prayers, for someone that grew up, in very kind of, this is how you pray.
Oh,
It's this
yeah.
idea of really no, it gets to be my way. And, in a moment, if my body is feeling tense or I don't know the way, it's like, please, change me to, be more open, or, please help me to find more grace with this thing I cannot control, right? Or whatever the thing is. But it's just such a wonderful, freeing way to, I've found, be with life, and to help women to be with their lives, not only as things are, but also to direct their life from that inner place of self-love, self-compassion, radical self-approval, all of those ways that, again, I think the reason that we're taught not to go there is because when we do and we're fully in our power, that seems to scare a lot of people. When we actually, when someone no longer has power over us and we actually are able to discern for ourselves, that's a a powerful amount of freedom, that means that systems of control can't survive anymore when we're fully, embodied, fully in our power and willing to say no.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the more that you are able to speak your truth, the more you can actually step into that courageously. It actually helps other people when you're honest. Like I'm having a big lesson right now with somebody I really care about. It's like if this person had just been honest with me about his truth and expressed it, then I would have known where he was, I could have received that. I might have been disappointed, but I could have gone, okay, well, I see where you're coming from. Now, at least you've told me where you're at. And then I'm not putting myself out on a different place thinking it's another landscape when it's not, then I'm not involved in your decision, so it's like when people are offering things to you or inviting you along with something, if it doesn't feel right for you, you need to say no. You need to say, no, that's not right for me. No, because it actually hurts more when people don't stand in their truth and they just try to go along with you. It hurts more when they're not honest with themselves. So I think as a woman, I've really learned that. And if not being honest with myself and not speaking the truth, I actually hurt people more than if I have that, here's my truth, I'm speaking it. Now you can either initially get upset with my truth or not, but at least you know where I stand.
And I love to, what else you're surfacing is this, again, as women, oftentimes we tend to avoid saying, for whatever reason, I'm feeling, right? I'm feeling whatever the feeling is. Because again, feelings, we've been taught to deny them. We've been taught that they are not to be trusted. We've been, or emotions, right, in the same realm. But actually, it's interesting. When we're not happy or we're not happy in a relationship and that has been ongoing, I'm not just talking about like, a day in the life, because of course we're not supposed to be happy all the time, but it's this idea of like that if you're not happy for a sustained a period of time, that actually gets to be enough of a reason, that is a valid reason to leave a relationship, to leave a situation. And I think that we have this, it's like I always say, and a lot of the work that we do is around really kind of this, getting to this unapologetic place, actually living
Mm-hmm.
a fully permissioned life, where it's like, I'm going to give myself permission to speak my truth here. I'm going to give my body permission to, express itself in a way that gets to be enough for me to say no to this, or to put a boundary in place, or for me to walk away or not do the thing because I'm having some dissonance here. Like it doesn't feel, there's something here, right? And again, we back to, we've also been, very much like what we can't see, we can't trust. And I love leaning into that more and more. It's like more of the unseen, trusting more of the unknown, because, I think the more we get fully embodied and we continue to give ourselves full permission, the more we're fully supported in all of those ways of knowing.
Yeah, and it's not until we let go of how we think it should be that, that creates space for how it is, which might end up being better in a lot of ways than the way you were holding on to that you thought it should be. Like it should be this way. This is how I want it to be, or this is the image I had on how I should be, my life should look like, or my family should look like this, or whatever it is. We can get kind of holding on if we're just living at that surface society level. We can be, oh, well, my life is supposed to look this way if I'm a mom, or I'm supposed to be like this if I'm a wife, or all of those kind of conditionings. if we hold on to that and we don't heed the body saying no, the body's like, no, it's not working for you. You need to stop that. If we don't lean into the unknown of like, well, if I don't do that, what else is there for me? Like if I walk out of that, is there anything for me going forward? And I know you took that risk and I took that risk. And I got to say, like, there's your cute dog. Then I got to say, yeah, there is something more on the other side. And it's been beyond my wildest dreams. Like there's definitely still pitfalls and yucky stuff I'm going through right now. But on the whole, like the life that I'm building for myself is so resonant because I'm leaning into that place of discomfort each time. And when I get the clear message that like, hey, this aspect is no longer functioning, winds of the west, take it away. Even if that's somebody really close to me, winds of the west, take it away for now. Fine, let it end. It might be 10 years before I hear from this person again. Let it go.
Yeah, and the
You
more
don't know what's going to come.
you don't know, and the more I think too, we talk about kind of disrupting these generational patterns, and how we do it is by modeling, this work. And that's how, we were talking about our children or our daughters, right? So I have kind of a fun story, with my daughter. I often love being like mother of the year, right? And my daughter is, a fairly talented, singer. She's followed a band, Lennon and Macy, I think was their kind of childhood. She kind of feels like she grew up with them. And one of them turned 18, and my daughter will soon be 18. And I decided to get her tickets when this singer-songwriter came out and did her very first show in Boston. And so unbeknownst to my daughter, I not only bought tickets for her and her friend, but my husband and I. And we went to this event in Boston. Now, being somebody that understands and has been to hundreds of concerts, right? I was trying to, not only was she so excited that I would have thought about getting these tickets, but I was practically like breaking my arm, giving myself a pat on the back, right? Like, I'm awesome. And so I take her to this show. And I was like, the pre-show is for amateurs. Let's go next door. Let's get dinner, and she's a Virgo. So she was feeling kind of anxious. Like, she likes things to be, very like by the book and orderly. And so we had a leisurely dinner, and we went next door and went in, and there was no line. I thought, this is strange. We go in and we could hear the singer already singing. And my daughter looks at me with like panic in her eye, and I thought, oh, she must have just started, run up. So she runs up, with her friend, and my husband and I get wristbands because we figured we'd get a cocktail, right? So we head up, and I'm looking around, and these teens are all kind of sweating, and I'm thinking to myself, must have just been the pre-band, like, okay, calm down, I'm saying to myself. And the actual featured singer, this singer-songwriter that my daughter has like invested all this time and energy loving her, the whole thing, says goodnight Boston and heads off stage. We had missed the whole show.
Oh my goodness sakes, that's terrible.
Well, it was, but what was really fascinating was that this was when things got really interesting, because I had this moment of realization where 6 Monicas literally started to come into play. There was a Monica who wanted to immediately go to the bar and numb. There was a Monica that still believed in fairies and wanted like the trap door to open, right? And like swallow me whole. There was a Monica that, was ready to go into denial mode. It's not my fault, something else, like blah, blah, blah. There was a Monica that actually wanted to minimize, right? No big deal, kid, it's just a concert, you're privileged, whatever. And then there was this final Monica that actually was the higher self, that was just in that moment, just said, stay. Like, just stay with the discomfort and the embarrassment and the shame of this moment. And just because I've been trained to disembody, right? done it my whole life. So in this moment, I had this revelation, again, the revelation project. I had a revelation that my whole life, I have tried to avoid moments like this, moments where I had majorly effed up, right? But here I also was in an opportunity as a human being and a mother to my child to actually just own this moment of like mortification.
Mm.
And it was really fascinating what happened. And I tell this story because these are these unflattering moments that we just think we cannot share with other people and that other people couldn't possibly understand. But a really interesting thing happened from this experience. Not only did I allow my daughter to have her feelings, right? So she got in touch with her, like her mortification in front of her best friend, her disappointment, where she was just like, she couldn't even look at me, you guys, like she was just like, oh, like she couldn't even deal with the truth of what was happening. Nor could I. And I remember just saying to her, I am just so sorry. Like I was so arrogant. Like not only did this moment mean so much to me, it also meant so much to you. And I screwed it up. And I just, right. So I just went into like, but she didn't even want to talk to me. Right. And everybody started filing out. And what happened was when we got over into the parking garage, there was a car that went to come out while we were standing there waiting. I must have looked so pitiful. But again, I'm in my body, ladies, right? Like this is the first time I'm actually like feeling, and tears start to roll. Not because I want her to feel sorry, but I'm really feeling like the sorrow in this moment. And suddenly she bursts over to me and she takes me into her arms. And this is my daughter who was just so pissed at me. But like she got to arrive at her own compassion for me in that moment. And she's hugging me and saying like, Mommy, it's okay. It's just a concert. Like she got to come to that herself versus like me needing to defend or protect or project my experience onto her. And what then on the ride home, this was the other really amazing part. In the moment of purely the mess of that experience, there was suddenly this recognition of how much I love her, how much I love people, and how much I go to the extent to give my people and my children a special something. Like that is like precious, right? And in that moment that I was able to self-love myself in that disgusting, ugly mess of like having screwed it up, what happened was extraordinary. It was like all of the ghosts of my past that I had never allowed like the thing for me, because I had pushed it away. I had instead wore one of those other Monica masks to kind of get through it. They started actually coming to me on the ride home back from Boston, which was an hour and a half. And I started almost like having this experience of, oh yeah, all of the events that were similar to that almost came to be blessed. And those ghosts stopped haunting me
That's so
from
beautiful.
all of that shame, right? From all the way back. So again, I think that there is something to us looking at, because we've been taught that whenever there's a mess, that we need to cover it, hide it, put lipstick on it, put perfume on it, put a plant in front of it. So many women are so busy holding everything together. And we're teaching our daughters to do the same thing. We're teaching our daughters every time we do that and we go to clean up a mess or do somebody else's work for them, what we're teaching them is that's what we should be doing. And it's actually sometimes counterintuitive and the opposite thing of being in the mess that actually models that self-love and that ability for everybody to own their own feelings in it, right? And then we're not doing all of the heavy lifting or the faking it until we're making it for others. And so it just becomes this portal again, I think, for freedom, for growth, for expansion, for love. And I don't know, I think that there's just something so there for women to explore. And I always say, like, that's my sweet spot, is helping women to navigate the mess.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love what you said about, when we try to fix things for other people, also what happens is there's also this sort of message underlying that message that says, I don't think you can do it for yourself
Yes.
because I have to do it for you. You can't figure it out. And it's sometimes scary to be a mom and to see that somebody needs to really go to the wire for themselves, like they need to take it all the way down to the very, very bottom of the barrel, so to speak, and do it themselves. And that might mean some mess, right? It might mean something that looks like not fun. It might mean some scrapes and bumps and things happening that we really don't want. But those are the things that also become the ground, the foundation of surviving. That becomes a foundation of knowing that you can handle anything because you just handled that. You just
Oh,
got through
yeah.
that.
That
And you
those are
didn't
the
have somebody like holding your hand through it. You did it yourself.
Yeah, it's like we don't have to do it alone, right? That there's actually people who are willing. I think, again, part of it is being fully self-expressed, but knowing that people who are willing to walk beside you in it, not fix it for you, right? That we
Yeah, the
don't have to.
fixing thing. The fixing is such a big part of being a woman and a mom. Is like you're told you have to fix everything. But you don't have to fix it. You just have to be able to be with it and listen in that moment for what the moment is asking of you, because it's not it's there's no, like, I also feel like beyond fixing, it's almost like there's this expectation that there's a one size fits all remedy for every single thing, and if you just wrote it all down in some book, you'd know what they were. But every kid is different, every person is different, and there's not a one size fits all. There's just the moment.
There's just the moment. And again, like, the best lesson, again, that I could have given my daughter in that moment is, this is what it is to be human and to be in the human mess, right? Because there's no part of my spirit or myself that intended it to go that way. It was an accident. It was a human mistake. I screwed up, right? But to own that and to actually allow everyone around me to have their emotions about it, then everybody gets free. Everybody has to get to has the ability and the capacity. They're creative, resourceful, and whole, right? Everybody gets to, and I think this is where there's so much possibility, right? There's so much room for us as women, as mothers, as men too, right? But again, my work is with women, and it's really about helping women get more comfortable with the mess and really looking at what is wanting to be revealed here.
I love that. Well, so beautiful. So I know that you have a podcast that you share a lot of wisdom on every week. Besides your podcast, is there any other avenue in that you want to welcome people to, or something you want to invite them to claim for themselves from your website, or something like, that you want to offer?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, actually, a great thing is something called the Bill of Rights. Women can go to jointherevelation.com and download our free Bill of Rights. And I say free, obviously, in exchange for your email. We don't over email at all. In fact, probably the opposite. I think most of the women that follow us wish we would be more in contact. I'm one of those reluctant marketers sometimes, and I know that we're all inundated. But what I love about the Bill of Rights is, again, it's this idea of kind of turning everything that we've been taught on its head and actually claiming our right to be shiny, claiming our right to make mistakes, claiming our right to be the very first one to be picked for big ideas, and to actually choose ourselves for big ideas and awesome opportunities. So I love when women, download that Bill of Rights, because I often will ask women to add on to it or make your own, right? It's this, idea that we get to really be our brightest, most imperfect selves, and all of it gets to belong.
That's gorgeous. Yeah, beautiful.
Yay!
Awesome.
Well,
I
thank
love it. Thank you. So what a beautiful conversation. I hope that this was helpful to everybody out there. Um, I just encourage you to share it out. You know, that's how we get this information out there more, is if we share the episodes out, and give us a review on iTunes or YouTube or wherever else and where you found it. And I'm going to give people kisses on the way out. Would you like to join me, Monica?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here come the kisses, everybody. We're going to give you kisses.
All right.
We'll
Thank you so much.
see
So
you next
great.
time on Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.